Welcome and good evening. We will begin the public meeting momentarily. We're waiting for the 6 o'clock hour to approach. Welcome to the public meeting for the draft permit for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1. We will begin the presentation in a moment. We're still getting set up, so thank you for your patience as we prepare for the public meeting. Please mute yourself in Zoom as you join. This meeting is being recorded. Recording has already begun. This meeting is planned for 2 hours, and some information will be repeated for participants that join the call in progress. Once again, welcome and good evening. This is the Georgia EPD public meeting for the Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1 draft closure and post-closure care permit. In accordance with EPD's safety precautions regarding the COVID-19 virus, EPD is hosting this public meeting via Zoom. Zoom is a free web conferencing platform that also allows for participation by phone. Please mute yourself in Zoom as you join. We also ask that you turn off your camera so that it doesn't interfere with our recording of the meeting. This meeting is planned for 2 hours, but may be extended or resumed at a later date. You may also rename yourself to your first and last name as you want to be logged in the public record. Comments will be accepted after the presentation on the proposed permit is completed. You then may list your name and affiliation in the chat window to indicate that you would like to make a comment during today's meeting. Further instructions will be provided after the presentation. We will be saving the transcripts of the chat dialog box for our records. At this time, our co-host Brian will paste some information into the chat. The message will indicate a welcome. Welcome to the public meeting for the proposed draft permit for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to William Cook, the manager of the Solid Waste Management Program. William.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this public meeting. My name is William Cook and I am the program manager of the Solid Waste Management Program in Georgia's EPD's Land Protection Branch. Today we are hosting this public meeting via Zoom. Again, Zoom, as we've said before, is a free web conferencing platform that allows participation by computer and phone. Today is Thursday, October the 14th, 2021, and the time now is 6:02 p.m. The purpose of this meeting is to take comments on the proposed draft permit for the Plant Bowen Ash Pond closure and post-closure care that is being evaluated for permitting by the Environmental Protection Division. During this presentation, we will give a brief summary of the Bowen Ash Pond and the draft permit for closure and post-closure care, including location and status for Ash Pond 1, the regulations governing the closure of Bowen Ash Pond, some draft permit conditions for the closure and post-closure care, links to some additional information on the process in AP1, and options for providing comments for the remainder of the comment period. Following the presentation, we will hear comments. Before we begin with the specifics on Bowen Ash Pond 1, it may be helpful to define some of the terms and acronyms used in today's presentation. There you go. All right, some of the terms that we're going to use today, and you probably have heard these before, is coal combustion residuals, are also known as CCR, and this is the regulatory term that we use for coal ash. So oftentimes you'll use all three of these used interchangeably, coal combustion residual, CCR, and coal ash. Another term that you'll hear, and of course that's the draft permit, is for a surface impoundment, which simply means a national topographic depression, man-made excavation, or dike area designed to hold CCR and liquids. Another term or acronym that you hear today is GWMP, and that does stand for Groundwater Monitoring Plan. And also you may hear the term, or you'll see it used in a slide or two, is NOI, and that stands for Notice of Intent. And an NOI is a letter from the owner notifying EPD of intended actions. All right, now moving forward to information specifically on Plant Bowen and their Ash Pond 1. This is an overall view of the plant and its boundary. So Plant Bowen's actual boundary is outlined in red. So that's the entire property. And contained within that is Ash Pond 1 that you'll see outlined there in green. And that is, again, the purpose of today's meeting is to receive comments on the draft permit for this ash pond at Plant Bowen. But also, too, we did want to point out that you'll see outlined in yellow is the perimeter of a landfill that they have on site. That is going to be a separate permitting action, and we'll have that out for public comment, the draft for that permit out at another time. So I do want to emphasize that today we're only taking comments on the Ash Pond 1, which is highlighted here in green. All right, and related to the location of Bowen Ash Pond 1, it is in Bartow County, and it comprises approximately 254 acres and has a total capacity of ash of 20.4 million cubic yards. It was originally placed in service in 1970. And as far as the water bodies are concerned, there is the Etowah River is to the north and east, and you can see that in blue there to the north and east of the facility, as well as Harley Creek, which is to west northwest, and again that's highlighted in blue that you'll see to the left of the green outline. Please note that this particular closure is going to be what's called a consolidated line closure. And Keith Stevens will talk more about that here in just a few moments. Now, this is a little bit related to the regulations. As far as our regulations are concerned here at EPD, we have our CCR rule, which is in chapter 391-3-4-.10, and it does incorporate the federal requirements. So whenever you hear us refer to state rule, it is also referring to all the federal requirements associated with CCR as well. We did submit our CCR permitting program to EPA, and that program was approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in December of 2019. And we just want to remind everybody that the regulations do allow the owner and operator to choose the closure method, and they've got two that they can choose from. One, they can choose to close it in place, such as they're doing with Plant Bowen, with an engineered final cover system, and they can also choose to close by removal. Plant Bowen is an existing CCR surface impoundment, which means that they received CCR before and after October 19th of 2015, and they did notify APD of their intent to close this site on December 31st of 2020. So at this time, now I would like to introduce Keith Stevens, who is our solid waste permitting unit manager, and he will be presenting the next few slides.
So the pre-closure conditions of Plant Bowen AP1 included that the northern 125 acres were covered with soil between 2010 and 2015. The southern 129 acres continued to operate and receive CCR until late in 2020. CCR thickness ranged from approximately 20 feet in the southern portion of the facility to approximately 115 feet in the northern stack area. Groundwater levels within the CCR ranged from approximately 0 to 20 feet, and there was no groundwater monitoring system. Georgia Power plans to close AP1 using a consolidated line closure. CCR will be excavated to remove all visible CCR, plus a minimum 6 inches of additional soil. A composite liner system and leachate collection system meeting the regulatory requirements will be installed on the subgrade across the consolidated area. And finally, dewatered CCR from Ash Pond 1 will be placed within that lined consolidated area. The consolidated aligned area will consist of 144 acres of the original 254 acres within the unit. The final cover system meeting regulatory requirements will be installed over the filled and consolidated area. And it is anticipated that a 5-foot minimum separation distance between the seasonal high post-closure groundwater level and base of the composite liner system will be achieved. Post-closure care will continue at Plant Bowen AP1 for at least 30 years following closure of the CCR unit. Post-closure activities will include maintenance of the final cover system, maintenance of the groundwater monitoring system, groundwater monitoring and reporting of the results of those groundwater monitoring results. In addition, periodic inspections will occur at the facility and be reported to EPD. Future use may only include uses that do not disturb the final cover system and groundwater monitoring system. And finally, the primary land use for the site after closure will be as an open, undeveloped green space. And now Beverly Tipton, manager of the Environmental Monitoring Unit, will present the following information regarding the groundwater monitoring requirements at Plant Bowen AP1.
Groundwater monitoring is required by state and federal regulations, specifically Georgia CCR Rule 391-3-4.10.6. An EPD-approved groundwater monitoring plan is required for the closure permit. Corrective action is required if certain constituents, called Appendix 4 constituents, are detected statistically above the groundwater protection standard and no alternate source can be demonstrated. The Georgia Power website for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1 is shown on this slide. Groundwater monitoring data can be viewed at this location online. All CCR units must have up gradient and down gradient wells in the network. Bowen AP1 currently has 24 monitoring wells in the network used for groundwater testing or assessing groundwater levels. Groundwater monitoring wells must be maintained for the duration of the post-closure period. Any changes to the groundwater monitoring network must be approved by EPD, including decommissioning or abandonment of wells and installing new wells. Groundwater results must be reported at least semi-annually. The figure shown depicts the groundwater monitoring wells at Bowen AP1. Groundwater flow direction is from left to right or west to east. The wells outlined in yellow are up gradient wells, also known as background wells, which are used to assess background conditions. At this time, I'll turn it back over to William.
Yes, thank you, Beverly, and thank you, Keith. At this point, we just want to list a few of the draft permit conditions that we have. EPD wants to assure the effectiveness and maintenance of the final cover and groundwater monitoring system through periodic inspections and review of groundwater monitoring results. So as you can see here in these bullet points, we're requiring that all CCR handling activities shall be conducted in accordance with the approved permit documents in order to prevent any air, water, and land impacts or public health hazards above any applicable regulatory thresholds. We also
and then of course there was
requiring
special land use permit administration in light of recent court cases. You know, the way that
sorry about that. I was just starting to talk on and realized I was muted as well. So I'll back up a little bit. I apologize. Just kind of starting with this slide again at the very top. Again, CCR handling activities have to be conducted in accordance with the approved permit documents, as I mentioned. Again, post-closure care is required for 30 years. Site access controls, as Beverly was mentioning, there are groundwater monitoring requirements that will have to be conducted for the next 30 years. Results reported for any inspections and for groundwater monitoring. So we'll be getting the data associated with that and reviewing it. The applicant must maintain the integrity and effectiveness of the final cover system and groundwater monitoring network, and there'll be periodic inspections, as I mentioned previously, will do to assure that. And then also that they continue to maintain the publicly accessible internet site and records for the unit. So the applicant will continue to do that. And that financial assurance will be kept to ensure that there are funds for the continued maintenance and monitoring of the system for the 30 years. All right, and then steps basically following this in this meeting, as well as following this public meeting. EPD will evaluate all these verbal comments that are given today and any written public comments that we've received prior to this meeting, as well as after this meeting. We'll respond to those public comments in writing, and we'll post those response to comments on our EPD website. And also we'll make any changes to the draft permit based on those comments, again, if it is appropriate to do so. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to turn it back over to our host, Hemi Buckley, in order for us to move into taking your comments, which is why we're here today.
Thank you. We now invite participants to comment. As a reminder, please type your name and affiliation in the chat to indicate that you would like to comment. Please mute your microphone. Please turn off your Zoom camera, and please limit comments to 3 minutes. Written comments are welcome. Please send written comments to epd.comments@dnr.ga.gov. The deadline for comments is 4:30 p.m. Monday, November 15th, 2021. The draft permit can be viewed at the EPD website shown on screen. Announcements can also be viewed at the EPD website shown at the bottom of the screen. This meeting was advertised by contacting individuals with a known interest via the Environmental Protection Division's notification list and by posting the notice and associated materials onto EPD's website. Please note that today's meeting is not for the purpose of answering questions. This is a meeting to receive public comment on the proposed draft permit for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1 closure and post-closure care. At today's meeting, we have 60 participants. And I believe all of those have joined by the Zoom web platform. Our co-host, Brian Love, will assist in identifying participants who wish to comment. I'm going to go ahead and read some additional instructions. If you have joined this meeting on the web platform, we ask that you take a moment to open the chat feature, which is available to click on once you hover over the top or bottom of your screen. Once the chat box is open on your screen, please indicate if you would like to make a comment during today's meeting by listing your name and affiliation. At this time, I will take a minute to pause and allow those participating on the web conference platform to do this. Once you have the chat box open, you will list your name and affiliation in the chat. Our co-host Brian will call out the names of those who've indicated that they'd like to make a comment. Then unmute your connection and state your comment. And I believe Brian will paste a note in the chat dialogue asking everyone to please list their name and affiliation to be put in the queue to make comments.
Yes, it's there already.
Okay. Okay, I think we are ready to take comments. And after we've taken comments from everyone who's joined by Zoom, if we have participants who've joined by phone, we can address those.
Okay, we will start from the first person who entered their name requesting to comment in the chat, Vicky Freeman. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you all for your time. Thank you, EPD, for the opportunity to comment on Plant Bowen's plan to cap in place coal ash pond number 1. While it's good that Georgia Power's plan includes installing a liner in the pond, because this is karst terrain that is known to be unstable with a propensity for sinkholes. A liner is really not going to help in the event of a sinkhole collapse. A sinkhole collapse under ash pond number 1 will release up to 20 million cubic yards of coal ash onto land, into nearby rivers and streams like the Etowah River, and leach into our groundwater. There's already been a sinkhole collapse at the site back in 2002, so the risk is very real and it's documented. As someone who's handled toxic waste cleanup losses, my experience supports that remediating a sinkhole collapse and a release of this size would be very expensive, impact public health a great deal, and prove to be very costly to the party responsible for the cleanup, which in this case would be Georgia Power. They'll have to fund the litigation costs and cleanup costs related to the spill, likely with little to no available insurance coverage because of their prior knowledge of the risks of sinkhole collapses at the site. So I'm asking the EPD, please protect our land, groundwater, and most importantly, the health of our children, families, and wildlife. Please don't gamble with our lives. Mandate that Georgia Power move the ash to a safe lined landfill. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next is Judy Lawrence.
Thank you for having this. I wanted to say that I was astonished to read how large this ash pond was. I can't imagine the size of something like this, 254 acres at the depth that you talk about, and the fact that there has been in the past a 4-acre sinkhole. It's just mind-boggling. When I was growing up, my parents always told me if you do something right the first time, you don't have to do it again. And I'm thinking that to this point, Georgia Power has not gotten that message. I hope that they will do it right this time. I don't live that close to Plant Bowen, but I have had experience with some similar situations where I used to live in Anniston, Alabama. There was a large problem with Monsanto. They had dumped very dangerous chemicals, PCBs and other things, liquid mercury, other things, toxic chemicals into streams there that eventually flowed into Lake Logan Martin. And since it was proved that they knew about this at least 30 years prior to when this all started coming out in public, when a lawsuit was filed, the plaintiffs in the lawsuit won the case and were granted at that time the largest settlement ever awarded in a case of this type in the US. And I'm thinking that Georgia Power knows the kind of land that they're building, that they're storing this ash pond on, and they know the risks. And if there is another sinkhole to develop and this gets out into the larger environment, are they ready for a lawsuit like that? I don't know. Another example from Anniston was concerned the Anniston Army Depot, whose one of their main jobs was refurbishing tanks. And they used many potent chemicals to take the paint off of these tanks. And a lot of this was not stored properly. And after a number of years, it was discovered that a lot had leaked into the groundwater. And there was concern that it would get into Coldwater Spring, which was the water supply for the area. And I remember a lot of reporting on the fact that there was really no way to know where that contamination was. They were testing people's well water and they were doing tests wherever they could, but there was no way in that type of topography to trace exactly where that water was flowing. So my question is, I understand that you're going to be monitoring, but what's going to happen if there's a sinkhole and there is a lot of contamination? I didn't see anything in the presentation about responsibility for cleanup if there is a major accident like that. What kind of remediation would even be possible? And I don't think it's wise to just assume that in an area that large, it's possible to completely line safely in that kind of terrain. I think it's time for Georgia Power to do it right this time and move
Thank you,
the
Judy.
ash to a safer place and store it safely.
Judy, thank you for your comments. We do appreciate them.
Okay, next is Dr. Don Kaysen.
Hey, I'm Dawn Kaysen from Powder Springs, Cobb County. Coal ash at Plant Bowen is known to contain many substances proven to be hazardous to health, including arsenic, mercury, cobalt, boron, and molybdenum. These elements persist and are not broken down in the environment. They can change chemical forms or attach to soil and water particles, but they cannot be destroyed. Arsenic, for example, remains in the soil for hundreds to thousands of years. One estimate of residence time is 9,000 years. Arsenic is a known toxin affecting many body organ systems, including permanent nervous system damage and even death. As well, it is a known human carcinogen. Mercury, another well-known toxin, cycles through air, water, and soil and persists for many decades. It both bioaccumulates in an organism and biomagnifies, building up in the food chain because it binds tightly to living tissue. Because of their persistence in the environment, prevention of contamination is the only sure way to protect from exposure. We know that Plant Bowen sits on land that is unstable karst terrain. Evidence of what can occur here has been observed in recent years. In 2002, a huge 4-acre sinkhole opened, resulting in significant arsenic poisoning of the water supply in New Harley Creek. And in 2008, additional sinkholes developed at Plant Bowen. Therefore, it's not a matter of speculation as to the instability of the terrain, but only a matter of time. This leads to the conclusion that simply lining the coal ash dump would not be sufficient to prevent contamination by toxins in the near future. To accomplish the stated mission, vision, and guiding principles of the Georgia EPD, you must ensure protection of not only the environment, but also the health of all Georgians, both current and future generations. Our moral imperative is to leave our children, grandchildren, and greats a better place. Please do not make a decision that results in a toxic legacy of selfishness and greed. The necessary and only viable action is to require Georgia Power to excavate the toxic coal ash and move it to a safely lined landfill on stable ground away from waterways. Thank you for hearing my comments. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for your comment.
Brian, who's next?
Okay, next, Scott Presson.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Scott Presson. I'm a retired public health professional residing in Lawrenceville in Gwinnett County. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I ask that you revise the proposed cap in place for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1 to closure by removal and relocating all the coal combustion residuals to a line facility away from the Etowah River and other rivers and lakes. Cap in place with a liner is not an acceptable long-term solution, in my opinion, for this site. My understanding is that with the unstable geology of the area, the risk of sinkholes makes this site unacceptable. The site has a past history of sinkholes under this pond, and I don't know how a liner would be adequate. Years ago, I lived in a house with well water, and we were informed that the area's groundwater had been found to be contaminated. With two young daughters at the time, we were very worried that their health and ours might be affected, but fortunately we remained healthy. But we were sensitized to the potential for these types of events to upend families and impact their health. For the sake of Georgia's population and the environment, I respectfully ask that you revise the closure plan to be closure by removal to an area with a more stable geology than the current site. It seems to me the right way to do it. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for your comment, Brian.
Okay, next, Melissa Keefe.
Thank you. I want to reiterate my desire that the coal ash be moved to a line facility on stable ground, not in an area that has karst terrain because of the sinkholes that opened in 2002 and in 2008. Personally, I had the privilege of spending the last years of my career as an elementary school media specialist at Taylorsville Elementary School, which is located on Old Alabama Road in the shadows of Plant Bowen. And the children there called the plant a cloud factory. And I thought that I often wish that it was that benign. But my point is that I got to know a lot of children and their families there. And, you know, it's one thing to think of a bunch of people living in a place, but it's another when you can actually put faces and you can remember things that they told you and how they loved books that you introduced them to. And I just hope that you think about that and do the safest thing, which would be to remove these really toxic and carcinogenic chemicals and to a place where they cannot hurt future generations. I think that that is our responsibility. And I appreciate being able to make these comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian?
Okay, Cynthia Patterson.
My name is Cynthia Patterson. I live in Marietta. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I oppose Georgia Power creating the largest coal ash site in Georgia and permanently storing coal ash on top of karst terrain that is known for massive sinkholes. Georgia Power plans to install a liner at Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1. If or when a sinkhole forms, the toxic coal ash will fall into the underground water system and flow into Uharli Creek or the Etowah River. A 4-acre wide, 30-foot sinkhole at Plant Bowen dumped 2.25 million gallons of coal ash in 2002. Arsenic levels rose to more than 120 times the federal drinking water standards. downstream public drinking water intakes suspended operation. Multiple sinkholes formed at AP1 in December 2008. We owe our great-great-great-grandchildren to act responsibly in 2021. EPD's permitting decision is permanent. Citizens expect the EPD and Georgia Power to do the right thing. Excavate the coal ash and contaminated soil, store it in lined landfills distant from our waterways. Require Georgia Power to protect our water, our health, and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Yes, Neil Sardania.
Thank you, Brian, for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Neil Sardana. I'm a Georgia citizen living in Atlanta. And yeah, want to just appreciate all the members of the public who've, come out tonight to speak out against this, very risky, dangerous permit at Plant Bowen AP1. To me, it's absolutely incomprehensible that, this plan is being considered. Obviously the history and evidence of this ground in which they're planning, which Georgia Power is planning to store, almost a fifth of all the coal ash in Georgia that is planned to be closed in this one location that has just this massive history of sinkholes and massive spills and failures. To me, it doesn't make any sense. It almost seems like they're playing Jenga with this coal ash, just waiting for it to topple into our water. And then, we, the citizens of Georgia, are going to be the ones who are going to have to deal with our waters being poisoned, with the fact that these toxic chemicals getting into our drinking supply and are going to poison people and put our health and our lives at risk, and certainly have massive impacts upon the environment. We know that this has happened many times before in this site, and to me, it's absolutely insane to consider putting this much, to put any coal ash in this area, which it's very likely to be at risk and to have another spill. And it's not like this is a temporary solution. This is a decision that y'all are planning to make permanent for the state of Georgia. So it's really only a matter of time before this coal ash spills again and poisons our water. So, I absolutely, can't see how they would consider this current plan. And I think you already pointed out that they're already planning to excavate this coal ash anyways. So to me, it absolutely makes much more sense for Georgia Power to be taking that coal ash while they're excavating it and moving it to a different location, a much safer location that doesn't have this history of sinkholes, that isn't, upon karst terrain, which we know is extremely unstable. So to me, there's really no question that, an excavation and removal to another lined landfill is the only choice you have with this amount of coal ash. So yeah, Georgia EPD, I really absolutely request that you reject this proposal as it stands and call on Georgia Power, require Georgia Power to move this coal ash to a lined landfill away from Plant Bowen, away from Harley Creek, away from the river, and protect us Georgia citizens from this toxic substance. Thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, we have Michael McFarland.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. A lot of people are already talking about the issues with the planning, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you look at it from our perspective. But I tend to think, well, why is it that people think the way that they're thinking? And if you look at it from a perspective of you want to increase stock performance so that your CEO can get a better bonus. Maybe it makes more sense to save some money and offset this cost to some sort of other person, like, oh, let's say the ratepayer. Let's have them pay for the coal ash cleanup. When you look at a lot of stuff that the Public Service Commission has done, including taking up public comments, it tends to also fall into what would be best for the profit margin, not for the people, not for the representation. And that's why I had to come and I had to speak about this today, is because letting them continue to believe that they can get along with this sneaky business that's hurting Georgians, it's just going to continue the suffering. It's just going to continue to allow them to squeeze us here and there every time that they can. And enough is enough. We've got to stop them. And part of that is talking to them about these types of decisions that when you look at it, there's no way that you can talk about how you're being responsible to your ratepayers, how you're being responsible to the environment, and how you're being responsible to the duty that you have to protect the duty that you have to the office and the protection of those that depend on that. Thank you very much. And again, I'm a resident in Austell.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, Jesse Dimon Chapman.
Thank you. Yes, this is Jesse Demumbrian Chapman, Coosa River Basin Initiative, resident of Rome, Georgia. I'll keep it brief. Plenty of people have spoken about the instability underneath this site. I do find it troubling that neither EPD's presentation nor the closure plan addresses that recent history of instability. I find that concerning and look forward to response to comments that suggest that this is an unsuitable site for the long-term storage of this coal ash, at which point I agree. The only further point that I would add to the myriad comments about the unsuitability of this site, the 30-year post-closure management plan is also insufficient. 30 years is about the same time between the startup of Plant Bowen and when these instability issues, the sinkholes, began to occur. In geological times, that's a blip. That's not a long time at all, and is certainly insufficient to maintain this site and to guarantee that local residents and users of the waterways are safe from this hazardous material. I'll just once again reiterate the many comments that have come before. I think that the inclusion of a liner was well intended and was certainly an improvement to closure without a liner, but the site is simply unsuitable and the 30-year timetable for post-closure management is equally insufficient. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Sure. Laura Stuck.
Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I'm just going to be reiterating what others have said. Because Plant Bowen is located in a karst landscape, we know that the ground underneath a lined pit is susceptible to sinking at any time without any warning. And so lining the pit is great, but if the pit and lining can sink into the ground at any point, the best solution is to move the coal ash to a lined pit on a landscape that's not going to sink straight into the ground in the water. Leaving the coal ash in a karst landscape puts everyone who drinks the groundwater, who recreates in the rivers and the lakes downstream at risk. Like, my family drinks well water. My friends swim in lakes in Georgia. They recreate on rivers. And this is putting the family and friends of others who live in that area and downstream from Plant Bowen at great risk. So I would ask you all to please require Georgia Power to relocate the coal ash to a landscape which isn't going to collapse underneath it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next.
Paulette Fricks.
Yes, thank you for having this Zoom format. And I wanted to raise two issues. Other people have addressed the instability of the land. But I wanted to talk about, I was in, I'm retired now. I used to be a CPA. I'm retired now, and I was in a master's program several years ago, and our young people are furious at us, not only about climate change, but also about pollution and the fact that we have left a huge mess for them to figure out how to clean up without giving them enough time to figure it out. And these are future voters, future power users, and they are absolutely furious at us. And I'm asking you to please think of them. Please think of them when you consider what to do with this. They're the ones that are going to have to be dealing with the cleanup, not you and not me. And the other thing is, being a CPA, I looked at Georgia Power's balance sheet, and their line for, I believe they call it contingency for risks and liabilities. In my mind, I mean, in my professional opinion, that number, I believe, is like 1.7. If I'm just remembering off the top of my head, but it is way too small. It is way too small for the industry that they're in and the liability that they're taking on with this proposal. And so Georgia Power is not prepared for any potential damage, which is likely. And our young people do not want a mess that we are leaving them. Please, please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Robert Wharton.
Hello, my name is Robert Wharton of Ackworth, Georgia. I would like to echo the comments of my fellow Georgians in calling for the safe relocation of coal ash waste from karst terrain to more stable ground in order to protect our rivers and waterways such as the Etowah River and Uvaley Creek. I'm one of those furious younger people that another commenter just mentioned who will be here to hold you accountable at the end of the day. We will not forget what you've done if you don't do what's right. Georgia Power provides an essential service to residents, and I commend them for that. But I would also like to communicate that those of us who are monitoring the situation will be there when it goes awry, and we will persist ensuring that environmental justice is done, especially in light of the known dangers that are being ignored. Our health, fresh water, and environment are all unacceptable casualties. I think this plan is a disaster waiting to happen without proper excavation and relocation. Materials should be stored on stable ground. Do not gamble with our health. Revise this plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian.
Okay, Aaron Mitchell.
Hi, good evening. My name is Aaron Mitchell. I'm the Director of Environmental Affairs for Georgia Power. I'd like to thank EPD for the opportunity to provide comments on Bowen's proposed AP1 CCR permit, as well as I thank all of you for participating in this important process. I'd like to first recognize, as EPD did, that Georgia is one of only 3 states that have been approved by EPA to operate its own CCR permitting program. It's an indication that EPA has reviewed, approved, and has confidence in Georgia's regulation of the closure of ash ponds in the state. Plant Bowen has been a part of the community since the 1970s. It's been permitted in compliance with numerous environmental regulations throughout that period. And the plant, as we know, is in the process of currently closing the ash pond. Both EPA and EPD rules, as stated earlier, provide 2 methods for closure of an ash pond. That's closure in place and closure by removal. Plant Bowen's pond, as stated earlier, will be closed in place We'll do that by excavating the ash, installing a synthetic liner, and then placing the ash over the liner with a cap over the top to create a new lined storage facility on Plant Bowen's property. We use proven engineering methods, including making foundation improvements as needed to meet the requirements of the closure design. The foundation improvement plan, which is included as part of the permit for Ash Pond 1, assures that the integrity of the ash pond, its foundation, and the liner system will be maintained throughout the pond's post-closure period. Additionally, as we do today, we'll continue to use independent third-party contractors to perform groundwater monitoring that is required. The data from that monitoring will continue to be provided to Georgia EPD, and it's also available and will continue to be available on Georgia Power's website. Both the monitoring and the maintenance required by the permit for the closed facility will continue for at least the next 30 years. EPD has done a thorough job in evaluating this permit. It addresses both federal and state rules, and it establishes permit conditions that we will follow that assure that Ash Pond 1 closure remains protective of public health and the environment. And finally, in closing, Georgia Power and Plant Bowen takes our commitment to the community, surrounding community, and the protection of the environment very seriously. Bowen and employees that work there are part of the community, and we are committed to the community to display our continued commitment that the safe and effective closure of Plant Bowen's ash pond will be done to demonstrate our continued support and commitment to the community. I appreciate the opportunity to provide these comments, EPD, so thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
The next name listed in the chat is Cynthia Patterson, but I believe Cynthia, you spoke earlier, so I'm assuming that's, we'll skip to the next person, who is Stephen Hale.
I'm Stephen Hale. I was a co-founder of Georgians for Pure Water, which was a citizens group to mitigate as best we could the effects of surface mining on the sensitive karst environment in Rome, Georgia, very similar to the karst environment of Plant Bowen. We hired a geologist who discussed and pointed out the many possible dangers that could happen. We did our best and succeeded to some degree to convince the EPD to limit as much as possible the method of surface mining to protect the environment. I don't see, and to protect our water source. I don't see that sensitivity on the part of the EPD yet. I certainly hope they have it. I would like to look at two things here. One is, in addition to the evidence-based comments that people have pointed out, one way to look at possible environmental damage is to contrast risk versus regret. Risk is the typical method. Georgia EPD and Georgia Power might think, well, there's only an X% chance that this coal ash pond will fail in X number of years. Therefore, we will get away with it. Well, no, you will not get away with it if it happens. Rather than looking at the risk, if you look at the regret, what are the consequences, even if the risk is, say, for example, less than 50-50? What is the regret we will have if a coal ash pond liner fails? Secondly, I'd like to look at some of the points from Mr. Aaron Mitchell from Georgia Power. First of all, the 2019 EPA, as I understand it, it was the 2019 EPA that reviewed Georgia Power's plan, is essentially the Donald Trump EPA. Trump had 4 years to essentially gut the EPA of any one who would speak out in favor of environment versus big business. Secondly, the fact that Georgia Power has a plan does not mean that they can implement that plan. Does not mean they will be willing to implement that plan. As I believe Colette Fricks pointed out, they are not backing up their implementation monetarily, obviously. And the fact that they are looking at monitoring and maintenance is again disconcerting. Monitoring simply means they will find out after such a disaster has happened, and maintenance, forget it. You can't maintain something after a disaster has happened. So I would ask the EPD to look at the possible regret. And as some people, including Robert Wharton, pointed out, there will be a great deal of regret for the EPD if they approve a faulty plan and that plan fails. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter, please.
Next is Lucy Julia Hale.
Hello, I want to say I do appreciate the opportunity to have this public hearing. I think that is certainly a step in the right direction. I am not going to say something that's very scientifically technical. I just want to point out that to everyone who has a hand in this decision, that there has been a sea change. We have, of course, experienced a literal sea change because of climate change, but we also have a sea change that's happening, as Colette pointed out, with younger people in mass. And they are looking at things. The internet has changed what your responsibility is as a person who has the power to do something that has this potential for, as my husband pointed out, regret. The tobacco industry had some things they had to make up for, but we're going to see something that's much more cataclysmic than that later when things happen because there was not adequate protection and there was a failure on the part of business and of our governmental safeguards, the people who are responsible for the safeguards. I think that it's good to look at now all the things that are happening that show that there will be more eyes, they will be more focused on that they deserve protection. There will be archives, there will be more research of research material, and there will be more personal responsibility. There won't be hiding within a report that gets lost somewhere and your name is never found again and you're anonymous. So I think we all need to look at, we're getting to a new level of responsibility. There will be consequences for not being conscientious in protecting the public. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
Next, Iva King.
Hello, my name is Iva King. I live in Athens, Georgia, and I want to say thank you to Ms. Hale for those stirring comments that she just made. I also want to address that Mr. Mitchell said that the Georgia Power would be working to stabilize the foundation. That already indicates that they realize that it's not stable ground. And sinkholes can appear so quickly that nothing can be done until it's too late. I also would like to point out that the monitoring wells placed around the perimeter of the lined ash pond will only find leaks close to those wells. Well, I have had several experiences with water leaking in my house and another building that I help maintain. And the water doesn't necessarily come out where you think it would come out. So water that gets loose because of a sinkhole could go miles and miles outside that perimeter and then show up. So that I don't see where those wells are going to really help monitor the situation. Lastly, Georgia Power already plans to move the coal ash, which is going to be expensive in itself. So why not go one step further and move it to a stable location so they won't have to worry about it and we won't have to worry about it for our children's children. I feel like Georgia Power can afford to do that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for your comment. Brian, next commenter.
reviewing the chat, it doesn't appear that there was any other names listed at this time. So I guess we can take just one quick moment, and if there's someone on the call that would like to speak that did not type your name in the chat, please do so at this time.
While everyone's considering whether they want to type their name in the chat, I will go ahead with this announcement. So we are approaching the end of the comments typed in, or the list of commenters who indicated that they wish to make a comment in the chat. If there's anyone on the meeting who is joined by phone and you would like to make a comment, I believe you can do that by pressing *9 on your phone. Brian, can you tell if we have any participants by phone?
I'm looking. Give me 1 minute. I see one phone number ending in the last 4 digits 7088. I don't know who it is, but if that person is on the Zoom meeting and would like to comment, please do so as Tammy instructed.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make this announcement, and we will see if there are additional participants who would like to make a comment. If there are any additional comments, please list your name and affiliation in the chat at this time. It appears that there are no additional comments on the web platform, and perhaps no additional comments from callers who are participating by phone. Okay, is there any change in the chat? Any requests for comments?
No, I don't see a couple of comments, but not requests to speak. So.
Okay. If there are no additional comments at this time, I will send it back to William to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Tammy. And we do appreciate all those who have provided your comments today. So again, thank you for your attendance at this public meeting. We have now provided everyone who indicated they wish to make a comment today an opportunity to speak. EPD will consider the comments that have been made and any other relevant comments received throughout the public comment period. And once again, as a reminder that this will officially end at 4:30 p.m. on Monday, November the 15th, 2021. Again, just as a reminder, EPD is asking the public comment for the public to submit comments again by close of business on Monday, November the 15th, 2021, to ensure their inclusion in EPD's final review of the proposed permit for Plant Bowen Ash Pond 1 closure and post-closure care. We do thank you for your interest in protecting Georgia's environment and your participation in this public meeting. The time is currently 7:03 p.m. and this meeting is now adjourned.